So today I want to just go over just some of the very basics of the graph editor in Maya. So this is really just kind of a very beginner level stuff, just to understand what it is that we do in the graph editor, what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and the power of some of the ways you can manipulate your interpolations between your keyframes. So what we're going to be talking about today is the concept of spacing and the concept of timing, and these are two of the principles of animation. Um, so timing refers to how long it takes for an action to happen. Um, so in this case, I have three balls, and they move across the screen in 24 frames. They're all moving in the exact same timing. Frame 1, they're here. Frame 24, they're here. Spacing, however, refers to um, how that ball moves in that amount of time. So it's more about how much it changes from frame to frame. And that's really where a lot of the power comes in terms of defining how something moves. So if you watch me play this, all three of these balls move in a very different way, but they all again arrive at the same location by frame 24. Um, so you'll hear in animation a concept called either ease in and ease out, or sometimes they'll call it slow in and slow out. Um, and that refers to the spacing, like we're talking about, how long it takes an object to begin moving and how it moves from one keyframe to the next keyframe. We'll hop into the graph editor in a second. This will make a lot more sense. But basically, in physics, there's a concept called inertia, and that's an object's basically an object's desire to stay at rest. An object at rest tends to stay at rest until acted upon by another force. And so depending on the weight and the mass, the size of that object, it might take a long time to get going. Picture yourself real tired in the morning. Sometimes you take a long time to get going. But it's like, if you have a 18-wheel semi truck, it's going to take a long time with a lot of force, exerted before that starts moving very fast. And for it to get up to 60 miles an hour, then it can really fly on the highway. It can go really fast. But then if they see something in the road and they slam on their brakes again because it's so large, it's going to take a lot of force and a lot of time for that object to come to a complete stop versus something very light like a hummingbird or something that can change directions very quickly, or I don't know, a ping pong ball or something that only takes a small amount of force to completely change direction or completely come to a stop. So let's open up the graph editor and we'll take a bit of a look at what's happening here. Move this over. So again, our balls are all moving across the 24 frames. If I select this first one and I go to its translate, X curve, this ball is moving in a perfectly straight line. You've heard the saying that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So when something's moving in this way, from one keyframe to a next keyframe in a perfectly straight line, that's called what we call a linear interpolation. Sometimes even, you'll hear people, if they're giving you notes, sometimes say, oh, it's too even. The spacing is even, meaning that it moves the same amount on every frame, right? It never picks up speed and never slows down. It's not accelerating, decelerating. It's just going perfectly straight from one keyframe to the next. So in the graph editor, your animation in each channel, when I say channel, I'm referring to, you translate X, Y, Z, rotate X, Y, Z, and here you see those same. Right now my ball is only moving in X, so we're going to be dealing with the X channel. But your animation is represented by time in this axis. You'll see these keys across the top, what frame you're on, time in this axis, and then value in this up and down axis. So, if I select one of these, I can see up here what the value of that is. This is at time 1. Here in the stats, this left box is your time, what key you're on, or what frame you're on rather, and then this is your value. So at frame 1, the value is 0. At frame 24, the value is 20 point blah, 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 blah. So that's basically what you're dealing with in the graph editor is keyframes, the little triangles here, and then interpolations between them. So they call this interpolation, this line between them, a spline. When you hear someone talking about, oh, they have to spline out their shot or whatever, it's really talking about defining the information, the interpolation between your keyframes and cleaning that up, manipulating that. These little triangle things with the line here that you see on the end, as I select these are called tangent handles. This all goes back to math. So basically, tangent refers to it's a handle that allows us to define what the interpolation between these keys is without having to set additional keys. So we can manipulate that and define whether or not, like I said before, something slows in or eases in, eases out, etc. But so again, this example, this ball you see moves very evenly and moving very linearly. But if we go to our second ball um, and check out its graph, you'll see it has this ramp up and then it starts going fast. So this is what acceleration looks like. And the reverse is what deceleration looks like. When coming out of my key for these first couple frames, right? It's not moving that much, and then it's actually gradually picking up speed, increasing speed, it's accelerating to that point. And so again, if you look at it over here, it starts out slow, kind of like the semi-truck we talked about. It takes a little bit of time to get going compared to this ball. Like if you were watching a race, it's behind this ball, it's losing to this ball, but then it picks up its stride and it actually gets there at the exact same time. It still ends up getting there at frame 24. So how you get this type of motion, like I talked about before, these tangent handles. Before on this one, the starting tangent handle is going exactly along the line of this is how I get a linear tangent handle. If you see, I select this key. This is selected. This is a linear tangent. But if I select this, for example, I get this flattening of this tangent handle. I can select this tangent handle and I can move it. I'm using middle mouse click and just sliding up and down to move this handle to define how that's going to move. I can even overshoot where it actually goes down lower than the key. This is not really clean or recommended to do, but where it goes down lower than the key and then picks up speed. And if you watch that over here, that's going to look like going backwards first and then forward. This is the top ball we're on now, right? But you could play with these different types. Some of the most common, auto tangent will give you pretty nice smooth interpolation between your different keys, where nothing's hitting too hard of a wall. It'll try its best to kind of keep your motion pretty smooth. Spline is similar, but sometimes you'll get, depending on how many keys you have, you'll get sometimes weird overshoots and stuff. Clamped isn't really used that frequently in most cases unless you have a lot of stuff that needs to come to a flat. If something's on the ground and you want it to never go below the ground, sometimes you'll use clamp tangents. Linear, what we've talked about already, where just the shortest point between two, being a straight line. Sometimes you'll use that on, something mechanical, maybe a robot or something will move in a very linear fashion. But typically, for more character stuff, that's going to be a little too, it's going to look, kind of mechanical or kind of unnatural if things don't accelerate and decelerate and just always move at a constant speed. You have flat tangents, which is sort of like clamped. And then step tangents, you'll see this usually come into play. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about blocking, which is the earlier phase of kind of laying out your key poses before you kind of spline. Some people work in this workflow, but if you're, say I select both of these and set them to stepped keys, what it'll do is it'll hold the one pose until the pose changes. So here, if we play it back, right? It's not going to move at all, and then on frame 24, it's going to pop to the next frame. So this can be useful when you're blocking in poses, like I said, and you want to only see your poses and not just some floaty kind of interpolation that Maya will give you in between. So it's good at earlier stages where you just want to say, okay, this is my pose, and then 8 frames later he changes to this pose and he changes to this pose without kind of seeing the confusing stuff in between. And so you could change these, just with a click, kind of at any time and see different motion changes, just to kind of get in there and play with and get used to what the different types do. So here I've switched it to auto tangent, and it's actually slowing out of this key, and then it accelerates through the middle, and then it comes to a slow rest at the end. So you see that in the top ball now, right? Whereas takes a little bit of time to get going, goes fast through the middle, and then actually eases in. So this is both a ease in and ease out. This one we looked at before is accelerating, but then it's kind of a fast in. It just, it's at full speed as it comes to that stop. And then this ball here is the opposite, where this is, fast out. If you shot a gun or something, it starts fast and then it actually loses some speed as it comes to rest. So these are some of the types of tangents that you'll see. These are the main ways to, these are the main kind of modes basically that your tangent can be in. One thing I'll note here, I showed before, uh, you saw the tangent handle on, say, this one, right, with this small triangle. These are non-weighted tangents, meaning I can move this up and down in position, but I cannot change the length of this handle. It's locked, and it's indicated by this little triangle. But if I go to this one here, I've actually switched this to what's called a weighted tangent. You'll see it has a square as the end of the handle, and that's because I can move this in and out as well as up and down. See, I can make this really short. When I bring it all the way in, that's the same as, a linear tangent. I can bring it all the way out. So I'm middle clicking and dragging with this, in translate mode. If I hold down shift while I do that, you see how my manipulator switches to these little double arrows. That means it's locked in just this axis, so I can't go up and down with it. So it'll just go in and out. So you can play with that, and it can be powerful as well, to be able to, certain types of motion you're trying to get, to use weighted tangents. And you can switch that here. If I just select the tangent, let's go back to this one that was non-weighted with the triangle. So if I go to curves, I can switch from non-weighted tangents to weighted tangents, and then I'll get the square, so I can then control. You don't want to go too crazy with this. See how it starts like kinking in on itself here. Sometimes it's better to just place another keyframe along your curve to define your path, only because if later I try to scale this entire animation or have to add some extra keys, sometimes I can get undesirable results if I've gone too crazy like this with my handle. It could be better to just put another key here and then just define how that transition happens. But you kind of have to figure out what style you like to work in. I've seen great animators who like weighted tangents, some who like non-weighted tangents, and some who vary it depending on the shot or the channel, certain channel that they're working on. So one thing to note, if you go to your actual Maya settings, is where you can set your preferences for, before you even start setting keyframes, at the beginning of your shot. You can set if you want to be in weighted tangents or non-weighted tangents here under settings, animation. And then you can also set your default tangent. I usually work in auto, but again, if you're doing that method I talked about with blocking, where you want to work in stepped, then you can put this on linear and stepped like that. And then every time you set a key, it'll already be assigning those tangents to whatever keys you put. So that's one thing to know. So one of the early tests that people typically do in animation is bouncing ball. So I want to just show real quickly what that kind of tangent would look like. Let me just hide these. Oh, where did it? Oh, there we go. Okay. So say I have this, and I want to bounce it here, and then on 12, right? I want it to go down and come back up. So by default, because I'm on, so now we're dealing with the translate Y curve, right? So by default, because I'm on auto tangent, if I play this, you're going to see that it gets to the bottom and it's not really bouncing. It's doing something more like, kind of swimming because of this ease in. As it approaches this key, it's actually slowing down. So here, it slowly starts coming down, and this is sort of correct, but then as it approaches this key, the ground, right, it starts slowing down, which isn't realistic, and then as it bounces back up, it slows out, and then it accelerates. So this isn't accurate, and that's why it looks like it's kind of underwater or something, because it feels a little soft at the bottom, right? So in this case, see here, I have my tangent handle. Since we want this to bounce and have a quick direction change, right? Whenever something, hits something, it's going to have a fast direction change. It's going to still be accelerating on its way down from gravity, but then it's going to switch directions quickly. And so this isn't helping me, this ease in and out. So there's a couple things I could try to do here. If I just switch this to linear, I would get something pretty good because you see now it's made a V out of this. And so if I play this, right, feels a little more like it just kind of hits that wall and bounces back. But the problem right now with that is I don't have, see how these are both sides of this, even though they're kind of in this V now, they still move together. And so I don't really have any control of defining how that acceleration happens. So let me undo or put this back to auto, how it was. Okay. So the other way you could try to do this is, see, so far every time we've moved this, both sides move together. But if I come, oh, if I come here, you'll see these icons. I can unify my tangents. Right now they're unified, or I can break them. So if I click this, you see it switches to the dotted line. Now I can move these independently, right? So this is helpful. So I would have a little more control over shaping this, how much I want that bounce to happen, how much I want it to accelerate immediately. See how it's switching direction immediately. It's coming down at full acceleration, still picking up speed, and immediately accelerating this way, picking up speed, and then it slows up to the top. So now if I play it, right, you see it has that really fast kind of hit at the bottom and then back up, and then it comes to a, its gravity and acts on it at the top. It slows and then it bounces back down. So being able to break those handles is something that's beneficial when you need, something to switch directions really quickly and to have control over both sides. And then if I wanted, for whatever reason, if I wanted, it to hit and then for some reason it slows back out, I could still do that. I could have one side come in really fast in, and then still ease out. That's going to look weird. It's not going to look like a bounce. That's going to, be something altogether different, but you have that power once you're able to break those tangents. And then for whatever reason, if I like these and they're back perfectly how I want them, I can unify these again. And then it's like I showed you before where they move together. There's a lot of other stuff up here that kind of deals with shaping or adjusting and retiming big groups of animation and viewing multiple curves at the same time. I'll save that for a later video because it kind of starts getting a little more complicated, but I just wanted to go over the very basics here so you understand what it is that these splines between the keys are doing and how to affect and manipulate them with tangent handles, both weighted and non-weighted, and then the different tangent types. That should be enough to get you started understanding, especially with the earliest assignments, bouncing ball and stuff. On what it is that we're trying to do with that and ways to control it here in the graph editor versus here in your Maya scene. So only with 2 to 3 keys, we're able to get a lot of different variations in movement based on how we define those splines interpolating between our keyframes. So hope that was useful, helpful, and